and welcome to this special edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Seltner in our Washington, D.C. studio. This week, we look back at some of our top interviews and special stories highlighting pro-life heroes, and we discuss important issues pertaining to life. Stay tuned throughout this program to hear powerful stories from a woman who survived an abortion, the Little Sisters of the Poor, and former Republican presidential candidate Carly Fiorina. As we delve into these issues, you should know there's always a way for you to be involved in the pro-life movement. While the culture may promote death, you can promote life. Here's the best way for you to do that. Go to your computer and type in prolifeweekly.com. Each week, we'll share a unique call to action. This is a way for you to be directly involved in the pro-life movement. Let us come together as pro-lifers and make a difference in our world. Once again, visit prolifeweekly.com. We also suggest you like and follow EWTN on Facebook and Twitter to stay on top of the latest pro-life news, and follow the Susan B. Anthony list, the pro-life group we team up with for EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. He used to believe he was helping women, but now one Catholic doctor realizes performing abortions only created more brokenness. We revisit the radical conversion story of a former abortionist who now leads the largest fully pro-life OBGYN in the United States.
Tepeyac OBGYN, how can I help you?
Located in Northern Virginia, Tepeyac Family Center is a first-class pro-life medical facility.
I heard about Tepeyac from a friend. This will be the second pregnancy with this practice.
So let's see how you're doing.
Christine Silva has been a patient for over 20 years. She chose Tepeyac because she felt her Catholic faith wasn't respected by her previous doctor.
He just started listing all of these different contraceptives, and he finished and he looked at me and he just asked again. He's like, so what can I prescribe for you? And I just looked at him and I was like, doctor, we practice NFP, I'm not gonna use contraception. And he actually laughed and said, okay, I'll see you back here 6 months pregnant again. And that was the end of the visit.
With 5 providers and a physician assistant, Tepeyac is the largest fully pro-life OBGYN in the U.S. But its founder, Dr. John Bruchalski, hasn't always practiced life-affirming medicine. Though raised Catholic, Bruchalski gave in to what the medical school system preached and performed abortions as a young doctor.
Contraception, abortion were part of OBGYN. And if I was really good at PMS, and if I was really good at menopause, and I was really good with my hands surgically, you want to be the best. You want to be the best at what God's presented you with. And in this day and age, sadly, you had to provide abortion care.
Then, during a trip to Mexico with his friend, he visited the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
I hear internally, why are you hurting me? I blew it off. I thought it was too hot. Yeah, done. Why are you hurting me? Well, I was already a medical student heading down this road. It didn't make any sense to me at the time, but I refused. My heart was getting hardened.
He went back to the U.S. and continued to perform abortions. But after going to a second religious pilgrimage, Bruchalski claims he heard Mary again.
Johnny, practice excellent medicine. Be the best doctor you can be. See the underserved as best you can in your daily work. Follow the teachings of my son's church as found in scripture and tradition.
So definitely the baby's head is right there.
Mm-hmm. He went to confession, stopped performing abortions, and founded the pro-life OBGYN with the Marian-inspired title. Tepeyac is named after the hill of Tepeyac, where Our Lady of Guadalupe appeared to Saint Juan Diego in 1531. The OBGYN even has a chapel inspired by Our Holy Mother. But the practice serves people of all faiths and all economic statuses for its higher mission.
You can just tell that they care about the whole person, not just the physical body, but they care about the spirit, they care about your soul, and you just really sense that.
Scary for number 4?
Yes.
What a powerful conversion story. Our Lady of Guadalupe, pray for us. When we speak up for the pro-life movement, we are being a voice for the voiceless. But that does not apply in the case of this next story. We bring you now the story of a woman who survived an abortion attempt, and she can boldly speak for herself. Weighing less than 3 pounds, Melissa Oden was born beating the odds. She is a survivor of a failed saline infusion abortion.
God did have a plan.
It's a procedure that injects a toxic salt solution into the amniotic fluid surrounding a preborn child. Cared for by NICU nurses at first, baby Melissa was soon adopted into a loving home. Now, Oden is a wife and mother, a Catholic convert, and a pro-life advocate, with speeches spanning from pregnancy centers to Capitol Hill.
I'm here today to share my story to not only highlight the horror of abortion taking place at Planned Parenthood, but to give a voice to other survivors like me.
It's a journey detailed in her new memoir, You Carried Me, released this month. Melissa recounts a series of tough truths, including when she, as a teenager, learned about the abortion attempt on her life.
To be 14 years old, it absolutely devastated my life. And I think like so many young people, right, I didn't want anybody else to know how much I was hurting.
So Melissa turned to what she calls her unholy trinity of coping mechanisms: bulimia, alcohol, and sex.
People often ask me, how did you ever come out of that? And I always say it really wasn't me. It wasn't. It was the grace of God that saved me. And I had to be willing to wake up and every day say, you know what, I'm not going to do that today, right?
The focus of the memoir continues onto Melissa's search for her birth mother as she wonders whose blood runs through my veins. She discovers her birth mother was a 19-year-old college student pressured to get an abortion. She thought Melissa had been dead for over 30 years. Oden's perspective throughout the journey is strikingly compassionate. Tell us how you came to have that approach.
It's a response that I think has deepened over time. I've always loved her, but my love for her deepens year after year. And not just because the circumstances of her life and mine are now different, right? I know the truth about how she was forced into that abortion. But I think the older I get, the more I learn how to love people and respect them for who they are. And I think motherhood has been a bond that she and I can really connect on that level. And it's a love story, right? It's a love story that God wrote, and man attempted to rewrite that whole story. And God's story wins in the end.
Now, you had finished this book, you had finished your memoir, you were done, and then something happened. And then you met your birth mother for the first time. Tell us about that.
Whew. That's where I have to take a deep breath. After everything I've gone through in my life and my healing from it, my tears are not tears of pain, my tears are just tears of incredible gratitude, right? I was not expecting to meet her in the course of the last few months. We have spent years getting to know one another, build trust, uncover secrets together. And so we met face to face for this first time early this summer. And I guess the short version of that would be it was everything I ever could have expected and more. To know that she spent over 30 years of her life believing that I had died at the hospital, how she suffered from immense regret and guilt. And then to have the opportunity to know that her child is alive and loves her and has forgiven her, and then get to meet face to face. Yeah, my excitement was for her probably more than me. But it was life-changing. I will never forget the moment that I saw her and we got to embrace, and I think the words that came out of my mouth was, it's been a long time.
You can order Melissa's book, You Carried Me, on EWTN's religious catalog at EWTNRC.com. The Little Sisters of the Poor serve the elderly's neediest in over 30 countries. But now, the women religious are turning to the young as they take on a new initiative.
And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Donning their signature gray habits, the Little Sisters of the Poor are champions of care for the elderly who need them most.
Oh, wonderful. You were a hard-working mother, weren't you? Yeah.
They've been in the spotlight recently for facing off against the Obama administration in the nation's highest court. The sisters say they cannot, in good conscience, allow their health care plans to provide contraceptive services, something that's required by the Affordable Care Act. Their Supreme Court case was sent back down to the lower courts last year.
Our case, it's not completely resolved. So I would just ask anybody who hears this interview to continue to pray.
Inspired by the court's hopeful action, the Little Sisters are now taking on a new cause with a giant mission: bring the young and old together to build up the culture of life.
We haven't had a meeting of Youth and Aged in a little while.
Sister Constance V teamed up with Janice Clark, a musician and consecrated virgin, to create Youth and Aged for Life as a response to some disturbing life trends.
Euthanasia is becoming more and more accepted, and I thought how interesting to turn that on its head, to say, no, we don't need euthanasia. We need Youth and Aged coming together in a partnership of love and prayer for a culture of life.
The Youth and Aged meetings go like this. The young and old join together to hear pro-life updates.
The DC Council passed assisted suicide by 11 to 2. It wasn't even close.
Hail Mary, full of grace.
Pray the rosary.
And blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Sing. And finally, to socialize. The group's founders say that intergeneration interaction is key for our culture.
I think today, because families live so dispersed across the country, a lot of kids might not have regular contact with their own grandparents, and so they don't really have an experience of older people.
The children need the elderly, and the elderly need the children, and the human family needs them as bookends. They're the bookends of the family, they're the bookends of life.
It's a life-giving truth they want to spread far and wide, so they put Clark's musical gifts to good use.
The time has come to take a stand.
And produced a music video featuring some unlikely stars.
Even just the idea of the elderly starring in a music video makes people smile and laugh. They're like, what?
Clark believes the Little Sisters of the Poor are the perfect carriers of the cause.
I see the home of the Little Sisters of the Poor as kind of a headquarters, a school of love.
For it is in the weak that the Little Sisters see a message of strength.
We hope that this effort will bring about as well to just witness to people that every human life is sacred, that everybody is a somebody, that everyone is a someone loved by God infinitely and eternally.
Life has dignity and purpose at every stage. Thank you, Little Sisters, for building up the culture of life. According to the Centers for Disease Control, suicide is the third leading cause of death among young people between the ages of 10 and 24. We were joined recently by two experts to discuss this startling statistic and a show on Netflix called 13 Reasons Why. Many caution may promote self-harm. Here's part of that discussion. Father Matthew Schneider is author of Spiritually Mentoring Teenage Boys and a priest with the Legionaries of Christ. Dr. Michael Horn is Director of Clinical Services for Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Arlington. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Now, my teenage years are still fresh in my mind. They were less than a decade ago. Let's talk about the unique struggles facing teens and high schoolers today. What are they grappling with, and what might make them vulnerable to a show like 13 Reasons Why?
Well, I think the biggest difficulty that teenagers are facing today that maybe, 20, 30 years ago when we had our teenagers, we didn't really face, was all this technology, which can be very helpful, but can also create a kind of social isolation. Mm-hmm. Because one of the great things about human life is all our social relationships, in person, talking to your grandma, visiting your grandma, things like that. And if everything is done over mediated by the technology, you lose some of that.
A personal interaction.
Absolutely. I think that we're more isolated, and even families are spending quality time staring at tablets. We're losing those genuine encounters that are really essential to health and flourishing.
If a parent or a youth minister might suspect one of their teens is dealing with depression, maybe suicidal thoughts, what would you recommend them? What advice would you give?
I think one of the things we need to do is really address the issue right away. Not be afraid of using words like depression or suicide, but approaching it in a casual way, in a way that says, I'm concerned about you, I want to help, as opposed to something that might put the teenager on edge or feel like suddenly they're in the spotlight with a lot of unwanted attention.
Well, I think along with those, I think there's also the fact of being close to teenagers, because if you develop a relationship with those teenagers, you're much more able to help them. And if you see that the teenager is struggling with something, well, find things that they're going to enjoy, help them out with that, you know? And also, I'd say the spiritual, in the sense of sometimes struggles are really like some kind of sinful thing, and confession is very helpful.
We're grateful for both the pastoral and psychological perspective on that tough topic. When we come back, meet the family of 13 kids with no debt, and Carly Fiorina opens up about her pro-life views in a personal way. Stay tuned as this special edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly continues after this break. Welcome back to this special edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, where we are revisiting some of our top interviews and special stories on life. I'm Catherine Seltner. Former Republican presidential candidate Carly Fiorina rose in the primary polls following strong pro-life debate arguments. How did the former Hewlett-Packard CEO come to be so outspoken on the life issue? In this exclusive sit-down interview, Carly Fiorina opens up in a new personal way about her journey to the pro-life cause.
Carly Fiorina, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
My pleasure.
You are not shy in sharing your pro-life views. How did you come to be so passionate about this issue?
Well, you know, it was experience, a whole set of experiences. First, perhaps, was an experience I had in my early 20s, right here in Washington, D.C., actually. I had a very good friend who decided she was going to have an abortion. And despite my talking with her, she was adamant about this. And so we went to a Planned Parenthood clinic. I observed that she was given no options. There was no conversation about whether or not this was the right thing for her and what her other alternatives might be. It was a callous experience. And I saw the impact of that abortion on her, not just physically, but emotionally and especially spiritually. Honestly, she was never the same since. I met my husband a couple years later, and when I married him, I learned that his mother had been told to abort him. She had him quite late in her life. She had a great deal of difficulty with her previous pregnancies, and so her doctor told her life was in danger and she should abort her unborn child. She refused. She was a brave and faithful woman. She spent a year in the hospital after his birth. But I've thought often about how different her life would have been, how different my life would have been had he not been brought into the world. I learned I couldn't have children of my own later, so I understand that life is a precious gift. And then on top of all of that personal experience, science is proving us right.
A vast majority of babies who are diagnosed with disabilities or special needs are aborted in the womb. You, Carly, after high school, volunteered at a high school for children with special needs. What kind of impact did that have on you?
I volunteered in a school for children that were severely disabled in some way, whether it was physical disabilities or mental challenges. Every single one of these children was gifted by God. And I can remember in particular a little boy who had so many challenges, and yet joy radiated out of this child.
Every life has value.
That's right.
Carly, you have battled and you have beaten cancer. Can you share more with us about that specific time in your life?
Well, anyone who hears the word cancer about themselves from a doctor experiences this moment of, or maybe many moments, but when you first hear that word, it's sheer terror. You know, it's a word that terrifies us. I would not wish cancer on anyone. Having said that, and having survived it, I can say now that cancer was a blessing in some ways. It was a blessing because it reaffirmed my faith. I relied on my faith, and my faith didn't let me down. It strengthened my family. You know what love really is when you're in a very difficult situation, not when you're in an easy situation. And it was a blessing as well because I experienced the kindness of so many strangers. Again, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but when you have an experience that starts out as terrifying and you end up getting through it, and at the end of it all, your faith is stronger, your family is stronger, and your belief in your fellow human being is stronger, that's a blessing.
Planned Parenthood supporters say defunding the abortion giant would prevent more women from getting breast exams and from detecting cancer. This is an issue that's obviously very close to you. So how do you respond to those claims?
Well, first of all, of course, it's untrue. It's a lie. Planned Parenthood doesn't provide mammograms. They provide references for mammograms, but so do pregnancy centers, community health centers. There are all kinds of centers available for women, most of which are not funded by taxpayers, actually, although they are funded frequently by the generosity of donors, that can provide a woman access to the holistic health care that she needs, including mammograms. There is no reason that a woman cannot have access to a mammogram. We don't need Planned Parenthood to provide that. I served for a period of time on the board of the GW Hospital in Washington, D.C. And just as one example, this is a hospital that has a tremendous program of outreach to the community. African American women are more subject to breast cancer than are Anglo women. We're not sure we understand this, but GW took it upon themselves to make sure that they have mobile mammograms that move into communities here in Washington, D.C. and make available to women on their, literally on their street corner in their neighborhoods, screening. So this is a myth that Planned Parenthood puts forward, but obviously it's a myth that has a big impact because we all want women to have access to early detection, which is the key to survival in cancer.
Carly Fiorina, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
One stay-at-home mom and a dad who's a software test analyst have managed to do something a lot of Americans can't: stay out of debt. And they've accomplished this all while saying yes to life over and over again. For Sam and Rob Fatzinger,
I say this is reality.
Finding quiet time doesn't come easily.
Should I unclip and go get them?
Wonderful, joyful sounds in our house.
This Catholic couple has 13 children and one foster child, with ages ranging as young as 5 up to 27 years old.
Are we gonna make a fence?
Here.
I'm making a house. Is it a house?
Well, what's that thing?
Oh yeah.
What's the long thing you make?
Playmates are in no shortage here.
Kind of fun. I feel bad for other people who want to clean or
Catch it soft.
like another school, they don't get to play as much.
13 plus kids might come as a shock for some, with U.S. birth rates at their lowest in recorded history. But that's not the most surprising number in this Maryland home. What captured the attention from media like the Washington Post, the Daily Mail, even calls from reality show producers, was the number 0, as in the Fatzingers have 0 debt. The family credits mom's simple living style and dad's number-crunching skills.
I've always been interested in, well, money, but in finances and numbers. I worked at a bank in college, and then when I got out, and Sam's good about, not the number part, but she doesn't like to shop or want anything fancy or doesn't have expensive tastes.
They even paid off their home in just over 12 years.
At first I was like this huge, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then I was like, hey, wait a minute, you know, I've been pinching pennies and trying to get cheap cuts of meat and using cloth diapers, and you've paid our house off? Like you've been hiding money from us? But then I was so grateful and I was so proud.
The Washington Post calls them the Einstein of economical because they've perfected the formula to get their kids an undergraduate degree on a bargain.
2 years of community college, because it's about half the price. The tuition's half the price, and you can transfer to any Maryland state school.
Their children also know not to expect a handout, and so far, they're all graduating without debt. The parents believe financial freedom is essential for staying open to God's future plans, something they want to share with young couples.
I would even like to catch them before they go to college, because I think that we have so many friends who are going into so much debt after college that when they're either postponing getting married or postponing having children because they have so much college debt.
This household doesn't claim to be perfect.
Sit down at the table, honey. I don't want you to take your yogurt in the kitchen, in the plate.
But knows how God works through their imperfections.
Like cars breaking down and, you know, people helping us out in so many different ways. God doesn't say, I got this planned for you. He just says trust and say yes.
The Fat Singers remind us to keep family trees rooted in faith and trust God will care for the many branches.
We kind of have a joke when our kids are dating or getting engaged, and I'll be like, okay, what's the secret answer if I ask you, how many kids do you want? It's not, I want 7, I want 10, I want 3. It's how many God give me.
That's it for this special edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. Remember, you can reach us anytime at prolifeweekly@ewtn.com. I look forward to seeing you here again next week. Life is a gift. God bless.